Hello, bud. Hey, Kelly, can you hear me?
Councilmember Dickinson, can you hear us? Sound check, Councilmember Dickinson, can you hear us? Are you unmuted? Councilmember Dickinson, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay, great, Troy. Mary, you must not be hearing us.
If I can hear you, they should hear you. They might be muted.
Troy, can you give her a call and troubleshoot?
Mary?
Yeah, please.
Okay, one sec.
Councilmember Ewing, I think we're ready unless you want to wait for Councilmember Dickinson.
Let's see if it's a quick fix.
Okay, I just sent her a text as well.
Wait, Kelly, like if there's a lot of background noise picking up from the microphones, you can turn down the mic input level so that it's not so sensitive.
What did I just do? Oh crap,
We can hear her.
back there, come
We can hear you now, Mary.
on.
Mary, can you hear us?
You can hear me? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mary.
Can you hear me? Yes? Turn up my volume. Aha, yes. Right, I usually turn it off. There we go. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay. We're ready to go.
All right, thank
Lift off.
you. Welcome everyone to September 6, 2022 Lake Stevens City Council meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If we could all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under
God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all.
Thank you. Clerk John, can we get a roll call, please?
Councilmember Daughtry,
Present.
Councilmember Peterson,
Present.
Councilmember Frederick,
Present.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Present.
Councilmember Jorstad.
Here.
Councilmember Ewing,
Present.
Councilmember Tajen. Do not see him online.
No, Councilmember Tadgett reached out to me and indicated that he would not be available for tonight's meeting. If we could get a motion to excuse him.
So moved. Second.
All in favor of excusing Councilmember Tadgett?
Aye.
All right. Councilmember Tadgett is excused. If we have, Clerk Chellon, if we have citizens, I also note that this Council President Steve Ewing, who's conducting the meeting, Mayor Gailey, is unavailable and has asked me to conduct tonight's meeting. Do we have any, nobody is in person here in council chambers or anyone online who wishes to make public comment?
So I did have a hand up, but it went away. If you're online and you would like to speak to the council, please raise your hand in Zoom. I think this person may want to speak, so I'm going to bring them in.
Okay, whoever is there, if we could, if you could please state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to address the council.
So I'm not sure they heard that. I think they're in now. So that the letters are ASIMN. I've brought you into the meeting. If you'd like to speak to council, please unmute yourself.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, you need my name and address.
Yes, please.
Ann Simonowitz, 1608 131st Drive, Northeast, Lake Stevens, Washington, 98258.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm speaking for North Cascades crew. This is an update from North Cascades crew regarding the displacement of the organization from Davies Beach. I want to thank Mayor and the executive for expressing concern regarding our situation. For 8 years, we've consistently contracted with the county or the city for the use of Davies Beach to offer learn to row classes, rowing, and workshops. Our contract was in keeping with the state, county, city objectives regarding inclusivity, diversity, and active passive use of public lands and waters. We focus on these ideas by offering underserved populations access to the water in what had been a rather elite exclusive sport. We have outreach, and we worked with the YES organization, Tulalip Tribes, YMCA, Big Brother Big Sister programs, and we've had funding from the Pocock Foundation to offer outreach in rowing. We've also worked with Snohomish County Conservation to offer off and on water activities for the public. The inclusivity and diversity is called for, but it doesn't happen overnight. We strive for this. We're now in the 6th week of what was to be a 4-week displacement from our location, and our ability to implement our objectives and programs are deadlocked. We're paying monthly to the city for use of the Davies Beach and our boathouse. We're losing grant money operating with a minimum fleet out of a parking lot at North Cove. Decreased programs and function equals decreased income. Our assets are lacking security because they're at Davies Beach, which is where our boathouse is, and the weather is turning. We relocated to facilitate a better good for all. I understand my organization has the support of the mayor and the executive, and I thank them for that. I'm baffled as to how we arrived at this place. Starting over a year ago with an appeal to the design of the docks, being told by the city it would be costly to appeal, better to comment, Commenting, which led to a hearing examiner's decision that the dock must have access for rowing shells. All criteria clearly provided by my organization, and being told we would be happy with the end results and our needs would be met. How we got here, I don't know. It's terrible to end up with this when we acted in good faith all along. It's been 2 weeks since meeting with the Parks Department, Public Works, Mayor, and Executive. I'm told options are being discussed regarding temporary and long-term options for my organization. I also understand, due to timing of the fish window, which ends on the 15th, I believe, permitting and other things, there are many obstacles. I understand options will be presented to the executive on the 11th or the 12th, with follow-up meeting with us soon to follow. We need your help and support for the continued operation of our organization. We have a lot to bring to the city's goals. Please put your support behind us for a swift solution to this problem. Thank you. Thank you, City Council members.
Thank you, Ann, for your comments. Clerk Challen, is there anyone else?
Do not see anybody else.
Okay.
Can I ask that we put that issue on the next workshop agenda on the 20th?
We can. I know I've reached back out to their organization that emailed us, and I know that Administrator Brazel indicated that there would be a solution that's forthcoming, but we could certainly have that as a.
It'd be great just to keep it on an agenda so that we're aware of progress. Thanks.
So Clerk John, if we can have that as a staff report from Administrator Brazel or designee, that would be helpful. Thank you for that request.
You bet.
All right, with no further citizens' comments, we'll close this portion of the meeting and we'll turn to a city department update. If we get up Director Wright, provide the Washington State Historical Society Heritage Grant portion of the envelope.
Okay, so I just wanted to give a couple of updates to the council tonight. So we had applied for the Washington State Historical Capital Heritage Grant for the new museum. We did make it through the first 3 phases of that process. So we are on the good project list. And now what we're waiting for, this will go to the legislature as part of the regular session to fund this project and all the projects on this list. So when the legislature goes through their budgeting process, we'll find out later in their session if they fund all of these historical society projects.
Thank you. And what was the dollar amount for that grant?
We're asking for about $744,000.
Russ, if I could interrupt you for a minute, but they're having a hard time hearing you because there's not a microphone in front of you. Can you grab the microphone?
Thank you. So again, just quickly repeat, we had applied for a Heritage Capital Grant. The city was selected and moved forward for our museum project, pending funding by the Washington legislature in their next cycle. And a correction, the grant amount would be $764,000.
Thank you. And is that it for the?
It is.
Okay, if we could go to council priorities and timelines.
Certainly. So staff has been working with the council president at our executive staff meetings and agenda setting meetings. And he brought forward some ideas that he had heard from council members and other ideas that were communicated directly to the city administrator. So over the last couple of weeks, I've worked with the clerk's office to take all of those ideas and put them in a spreadsheet and then bring them back to council just to take a look at that list of priorities that are in your projects. And then what we've done beyond that, that you don't see in the spreadsheet in front of you, there are drop-down columns that have everything from the status of that action to the timing when council can expect it, and then the status of that. So we just wanted to bring that forward to you tonight so you knew that we hear you. We're working on your issues and priorities, and we'll bring those back in a systematic way, whether it's through just a general department report or discussion item, depending on what the issue is. So just kind of looking to council tonight to see if that's meeting the needs of how you'd like those items brought back to you.
So council, it is up on the screen here. Just sharing what our spreadsheet looks like here and our drop downs and how we're tracking when we're giving these reports.
Look at the staff this morning to go into this and start identifying when they can bring their items back for action.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from council members?
This is super helpful just to see it all on one page. I really appreciate the spreadsheet and definitely will digest it and give feedback, but super appreciate the work. Thank you.
Yeah, and hats off to Caitlin. She did an amazing job putting this together.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Any other comments or questions from council members? So as stated previously, if there are things that we want to address or priorities, just like Councilmember Jorstad noted, please reach out to me directly or to our city administrator, and we'll work to address those matters. All right. Hearing no discussion for further. Thank you, Russ, for your presentations. Did you have any? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. So who? I don't see any listed on here.
Sure. So before the meeting, we have a couple of other staff that would like to give brief presentations. So if the clerk's office can give a brief presentation on the vote that was taken at the last council meeting. The recording at the end after executive session wasn't on the YouTube. So some folks just wanted for the record what transpired. And then our Parks Director, Sarah Garceau, is going to give a brief presentation on what's happening in the first couple of weeks with her on board. So.
Yes, okay, so I will give an update here. So at the August 23rd council meeting, your last council meeting, you came out of executive session and took action on resolution 2022-12. And this resolution was authorizing the city council to surplus parcel or to surplus the Chapel Hill properties and authorize the mayor to or designee to convey or sell real property pursuant to chapter 2.98 from our Lake Stevens Municipal Code. And unfortunately, we had technical issues. So that part of the meeting was not on the recording. So in all transparency, I just wanted to read that out loud, that resolution was passed. The vote was 6-1 with Councilmember Dickinson opposed. So if there's any other questions on that, let me know. I'll make sure, of course, that the minutes reflect that, but it wasn't part of the YouTube recording. So
thank you.
Yeah.
Director Garceau.
Thank you. So I just wanted to give an update on what has been occurring over in the Parks Department for the last few weeks. I am still onboarding and cross-training with various departments, but have met with at least half at this point and getting very familiar with city policies and how things have been ran in the Parks Department so that I have a good understanding. Recent work that has been going on is we just replaced the pressure relief valve right outside here at North Cove for the water spray park. We have gaming boards that are arriving this week that will be installed here in the next 2 weeks. So that includes the cornhole that's going in at Frontier Heights. And then here at North Cove, we have a table tennis, cornhole, and 2 chess boards as well. So we're looking at final placement on that currently. As a team, my staff has started to review park plans. So we're looking at Sunset Beach Park and Frontier Heights and getting familiar with several of the other projects that are upcoming and already in the works. We do have a Parks and Recreation Planning Board meeting on Monday, September 12th, 6 p.m. So 1 week from today. And then over the next 90 days, we have a full plate. We're trying to get deadlines on each of these tasks, but as an overview, we'll be creating a full inventory of parks, amenities, and equipment. We'll be finalizing a list of current and upcoming projects as well as scheduled events. We'll create daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly maintenance schedules. I am reviewing current rules, policies, and applications for our parks and facilities. We will then inspect all parks and playgrounds and create prioritized needs lists for each park as well as the department as a whole, and then create department policies and standards. So those are deliverables that I'll be bringing forward as we have stuff to share. Thank you.
Excellent. All right. Thank you. We could move on to our Finance Director, Barb Stevens, for a 2023 budget discussion.
Okay, you're good. You shouldn't need me to unmute my computer, correct? Correct. Okay, perfect. Good evening, council. So this is our first look at our 2023 budget process and priority discussion. We are a couple of weeks. Okay, I'm good now. Okay. You heard me clicking. So here's our draft budget schedule, and I will be sending that out to council. I did send you the email of this presentation just before the council meeting. Sorry, I was still working on it right up until then. So we are a little ahead of schedule in comparison to prior years. I'm about 2.5 weeks ahead of schedule, so I'm trying to give council more time and departments more time and opportunity to create their budgets and then go through budget discussions and processes. The highlighted dates here are the dates that will be coming to council for presentations. As you can see, next council meeting, I am going to bring forward your estimated revenues and preliminary budget. So that's the base budget that we create based on our current staffing levels, current projections for cost of living, current levels of service, that sort of thing. So this is just a visual of our budget process timeline. So in August, finance starts creating the base budget and the forecast of revenues. This is revenues are based on trends, projections, data from outside sources like Washington City Insurance Authority, Association of Washington Cities, and Municipal Research Service Centers with their budget recommendations and revenue forecasts. And then expenditures, as I mentioned, are based on current staffing levels and current programs. And then with some cost increases, this year we have communication seems to be a larger increase and fuel costs. So some of those are built into the process. And then right now, so we have early September, we go through priority discussions with the mayor and city council. And then I will get the base budget out to department heads probably tomorrow. That will include instructions, request forms, the base budget with all their line items. And then they will have a few weeks to actually go through all of their process, review all their lines, determine what budgets they actually need for next year. And then by late September, all the requests are compiled for presentation to the city administrator and the mayor and ready for presentations to council, which will happen throughout October. And then hopefully, if all goes well, by November 1st, we will have the proposed budget finalized and it's available to the public and ready for public hearings in November. So our public hearings currently are scheduled for November 8th and November 15th. Is that right? No, November 22nd, November 8th and November 22nd. And so that's our normal date for them. If things come up, we can push them forward. And then if we need to continue, we can go into December if we need to. So this year we're beginning the new process that we've discussed with council for department budgeting. For legal reporting purposes, we'll still be reporting on a fund level. And so that's general fund, street fund, anything within that, we can still, as a citywide, be over budget in some departments and under and still be legally under compliance. But this will give the department heads more flexibility in utilizing their budgets as they need. So if they need more operating
supplies and don't need something that they were going to do for professional services, they're able to move those budgets around without coming back to council. They will still need to provide finance with line item budgets so that we can put it in the financial system so we can track those things, but then they'll just come to finance and we will adjust the budgets for them versus needing action. So there are some exceptions to these that are set by finance and council, and that's the salaries and benefits, liability insurance, debt, capital contributions, some of those that are set and calculated with the department heads while we're creating the budgets, but then are not part of that flexible budget. Additionally, salaries and benefits will be treated differently this year. Each department will have a budgeted number of positions or FTEs and a stated salary and benefit budget. This will give them some flexibility to perform some reorganizations, reclassifications within their department without council approval if their number of FTEs doesn't increase and their dollar amount for the salaries and or benefits doesn't increase. Otherwise, they would have to come back to council for that approval. There are a few things that have come up since the last time we discussed this, some potential exceptions to these scenarios. A couple of things we discussed were field positions versus administrative positions. I know council is pretty adamant about their crew, their field crew, and maybe patrol officers. Some of the things that I was thinking of is, you know, potentially not allowing field workers be traded for office staff. So you wouldn't trade a crew worker position for an engineer or an officer for a crime analyst. Something along those lines, and council can make a completely different decision if they'd like to do that. But I know most of the time council likes to have, I like crews out on the floor, you know, out on the ground, on the street. And so that would be something that council needs to kind of make a decision ahead of time. And so that's kind of one of the things that HR and I kind of discussed a little bit is maybe does not include field positions. So those would have to come to council in order to change those number in the field. And it might be able to change from a public works crew worker 1 to a crew worker 2 if overall the budgets don't change, but going from someone out in the field to someone in the office might be an exception to that. Also, something else that might be an exception is if you trade an open position for a position in a higher salary range, even if that doesn't affect your current year budget, it may cause your future budget, your future forecast to change. Knowing what council's comfort level is in that, is it a 5% increase next year, or are you fine as long as it doesn't affect the current year? Some of those kind of things. If you went from, say, an assistant planner and you found someone great and you wanted a senior planner, that's a lot of steps higher. So that's really going to affect your future forecasts. How would council like to approach that? Would you like that to come back to council for approval? And we can work through some of these things as we're going through the budget process, but having some of these ideas up front will give staff a better understanding of how to move forward and set up the budget. So, a couple things to think about there. I think those are the only big questions I have on the budget process, on how council wants to walk through the process. Some things we wanted to kind of go over the budget priorities. So our 2022 budget priorities, we are still diligent. We'll be working through all of the as you remember these processes and programs. So just a reminder, the APWA accreditation, that is work's being done by citywide on that, and our risk manager is tracking that and scheduling those things, and we have regular check-ins, and so that is coming along well. Completing the capital projects. Obviously, we've been working very hard and very fast to get some of these projects done. I know Director Halverson's department really is trying to get some of these checked off the list. We did add a number of projects in 2022, so we continue to add as we're attempting to complete the capital projects from prior years. Streamlining the citywide processes. We have a number of lean processes going on, and also implementation of new software that will help with this process. Enhanced transportation program and funding. We all know the November 8th ballot is coming up, so hopefully we will know where we stand once whether the TBD gets funded or not. If it does get approved, then we'll need to do a budget amendment to add that funding in and add those projects in once that occurs. So we will be having our first public hearing the night of that vote. So we'll have to amend the budget to add or not at that point. And then Park and Rec program and funding. Obviously, we welcomed our first Park and Rec director here. So that is ongoing as well. And I know there's a number of enhancements and that she intends to present to council as we go through the budget process as well. So that one's continuing. So in discussing some of our processes and priorities with the mayor, the majority of these are continuing and ongoing. So they may continue to be our priorities for 2023. We did discuss the potential of attracting quality candidates and staff retention. We have some discussions and presentations coming up on salary survey, strategic staffing, cost of living increases, and potential incentives. I know the police chief has some ideas for incentives for the 2023 budget as well. So that might be an additional budget priority as well. But at this point, I'd like to know what council feels their priorities or new initiatives. Is there something that you would like us to work on that we're not working on? I know council also discussed the level of involvement that you have, and I would love suggestions as to what that would entail, how we can provide you more beneficial information without overloading you. I know sometimes we present too many details and it's not summarized enough, and then other times it's maybe kind of just an overreaching understanding. So I'd love some recommendations on how we can just continue to move forward through this process.
Comments? Question.
Barb, on, and this is asking to kind of look forward a little bit, but on August 29th, the council members got a memo from City Administrator Brazel talking about citywide salaries were about 49% of the budget at the end of July. Fully staffed, they should be around 58%. There's about $1 million or so that has not been spent. What are your projections as to where we're going to be at the end of the budget year?
So I actually put together our base budget for 2023 with our expectations on where we are now and where we expect to be at the year end, and moved out the 6 years. And right now we're looking pretty well. I think we're going to be including increased revenues and then decreased expenditures. I believe we are in the black about $1.52 million. This does also have to do with the pandemic recovery money, since we actually received that into the general fund, and we're actually dispersing it out into the other funds that are utilizing it. And so there is a large increase in our 2022 revenue stream for that are just going to our operations at this point. I can actually possibly bring that up.
But I guess my question is, what is your projection as far as the salaries? Like I say, we're about $1 million under budget right now. At the end of the year, where do you suspect that's going to be? Is that going to continue to increase? I mean, we've had a relatively good hiring spree here in the last 60 days.
Right. We do still have a number of positions that are remaining open at this point. Let me take a quick look at my salaries.
And I guess it's leading to my question as to, I mean, we're coming up on some discussions about property and so forth, but I guess the question would be, wouldn't it be better to bank that rather than disperse it out to some other areas?
And I would say we are. So this is general fund that we're talking about. The operating funds are rolling into next year. Director Wright and I were talking about it earlier today, that the savings from having these open vacant positions has really helped our forecast over that 6-year period. Obviously the longer we postpone those, the more money we're saving and pushing into future years. The funding that we're discussing with property purchases and capital are coming out of separate funds, separate line items. And so we do utilize not just our general fund operating, but also our contingency general fund money that we've been putting away. That's all the additional construction sales tax. We do utilize that for our operating as well. And so whenever I use the forecast, I show the general fund forecast, which does decline quite sharply. And then we have the contingency fund, which actually keeps us level. And so in future years, we are getting closer to spending less or very close to the amount we're actually bringing in, which is a wonderful thing. I mean, we have been saving for so many years and then spending down our reserves that now we're actually getting to a point where we are actually spending close to what we're bringing in versus way more. So where do I think we'll be? That short answer, long answer, short answer. I don't think we'll be $1 million short, but we will still have a savings.
All right, thank you.
So Barb, can I follow up on that question from Councilmember Peter Shaken? So if we're already $1 million, say ahead, and these positions are already funded, that's generating this surplus. I guess my limited thought process would suggest that that number would only go up, it wouldn't go down, since they're already funded positions, correct? So it can only go up from $1 million to whatever that number might be in the next 4 months.
Yes, so they are funded. When I'm looking at the forecast on what we're actually doing, I'm not forecasting the full budgeted amount, but we will stay under budget, definitely.
So I know one thing, thank you for that. Any other questions or comments from council members?
I see Mary waving.
All right.
Raise my hand. I thought that would work. First of all, thank you so much, Barb. You are amazing. So grateful to have you do your work. But the one thing I just wanted to check that I didn't see in any of the reading I did was your trading, the trading jobs that you talked about. Would this help the departments to have, what did their take on that concept? What was their take on that? That it would help them to do this, training an open code enforcement position for a planner, or as you say in your write-up?
Regarding the field staff versus administrative staff, we haven't gone too into that, as I know that's generally more of a council priority to have set number of field staff. So we haven't really discussed trading that out. The only one I had discussed that with at this point was Director Warrington in HR, and we sort of came up with the concept of maybe field staff isn't included in that, but we will definitely have additional conversations with department heads as we go through this.
All right, thank you.
So I guess on the face of it, I would say just right now, my feelings are that field staff are sacrosanct. And if we don't have any trades between them, I'd have to have some pretty good motivations to change my view on that. However, if all we're really talking about is if you wanted to do that, you come back to council, then I don't ever have a problem with you coming back to council and asking for permission to do something. Whether we give it to you or not, it's up to us at that time. But as a matter of course, I don't think that trading field staff into administrative staff does very good for the overall good of the community. So that's just my take on it.
I'd have to agree. One of the things, Barb, you asked for priorities from the council. And it's always a priority. It goes without being said, and it's not said here in the report, but it does involve field staff, and that's public safety. We're a city that's growing. You know, I think a priority that always needs to be stated is public safety. It's our primary function as a city to ensure the safety and security of our residents. So to that end, I would agree with Councilmember Daughtry. I would be hesitant to want to trade field staff across the board without a really solid reason where staff said this is necessary and to the benefit of our residents. I also think it's important that if it hasn't already specifically been said, I think that it was announced in 2022 that the American Public Works Association accreditation was a priority. Accreditation matters, not just because it allows you to identify best practices, but it has a significant morale impact for our staff. And I would say that it's important that we have already agreed to that investment, that remain a priority until completion, because to not continue it would have a negative impact for our staff for all the effort that's already gone into it. I think the other priorities, if the mayor's intent is to move forward with a set of priorities similar to 2022 to improve services, level of service to our residents, and seek funding for TEB, I think those are certainly appropriate. But I think the thing that isn't explicitly said here is public safety. So that would be the one thing I would like to see added as a priority that isn't necessarily said there. The last thing, no, that's actually already there. I think all of us on council have always seen parks as a priority. It's also a public safety thing as well as a health issue. So I'd also like to see that continue as a priority.
I think to piggyback on Councilman Frederick's comment, and we've talked about this before as well, but it's not explicitly said. I want to make sure that we are focusing our dollars on processes and items we've already invested in rather than diving into something new. I think that we've invested, a lot of time and energy into a parks department, into the Mill Spur, into other things that are doing well and need continued investment to continue to do well. So I would hate to see us pulling resources away from some of those people and items that we've invested in to start some new things. I appreciate that the 2023 priorities are very similar to 2022, that we're going to kind of keep doing what we're doing. And I just, I think it's imperative that we continue to have a really, really strong foundation before branch off into any new ideas.
Can I interrupt before you? I have a follow-up question for Councilmember Frederick. So your question about parks and recreation being a priority. So what would that look like to you as far as maintaining that as a priority?
I think maintain is a key word. One of the things we have invested significantly in recent years in developing parks and acquisition of parks. I think one of the things that is really important at this stage, while we continue to look for those new opportunities, is not losing ground on the parks that we have. Looking for new opportunities for new or novel grant opportunities to improve the level of service provided by our parks, I think would be important. Kind of hard to flesh out as a budgetary item, but certainly an aspirational discussion point when we talk about seeking out ways to innovate and make and improve level of service to our parks.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to mention that I believe that some of what we just talked about were on your exception scenarios. And I understand that that is kind of a high level brief there. And I would like to be going back and talking about these exception scenarios again in a little bit more detail, especially this where it might cause future forecast to change and what level that the council is comfortable with letting that happen. So I think it would be good if you could bring, just say one scenario of that to show what that would do for just one position. And with real numbers attached to whatever our budget is right now. And I know we really don't want to go through this now. That's not the point of your presentation, but that's one of those things that I would be looking for to try to help myself make that decision.
This is definitely the point of this discussion. I definitely want some more input on how we're going to move forward with this. It's new for us. This is new, doing department budgeting and allowing the flexibility to department heads to move their budgets around. And so I'm looking for any input council has. I don't want to go beyond what council is comfortable with, as this is all council decision. You are in charge of the money, and I want to make sure that you guys are comfortable with what we're moving forward with.
And we should be clear as a council that it's the council priorities. We're the ones that are voting on this budget. We're representing our citizens. And so while we appreciate the staff's input, we need to be clear and what our expectations are and putting that forward. So we need to make sure we're providing staff with the most clear directives and priorities that we have, because they're the priorities that we have in representing our citizens.
Well, I don't want to diminish the importance of the staff bringing us these types of foreseeable problems that if they see it as it might be a problem in how they make their decisions. I don't want to diminish, hey, bring that to us and we'll make a decision about it. So when they're coming up with, can I trade crew workers for an engineer and those kinds of things, I didn't foresee that in this conversation. So I know the staff they're smarter in their areas than we are. And it's good to have them come and say, well, here's a scenario that I'm not sure we could handle without council input. And then if we can handle it ahead of time with some kind of a process or procedure, or here's what we think that scenario looks like, then, better for it. But I appreciate that they would bring something like this, these exceptions that they have thought of, to us, so we can start thinking a little bit more broadly, because I had no idea thinking of those things.
Yep.
I tend to agree. And I think, again, going back to, the scenarios that are likely to happen. And so if you're able to show us here are 3 different possible scenarios, would you be comfortable with, staff making decisions on all of these? Is there a threshold? I think you mentioned earlier, is there a percentage where, if that salary increased over 5%, you would want to be notified? I think, I don't know the scenarios you're likely to face, but to have that in front of me and then to be able to give feedback based on what is likely to happen, I think I would feel more prepared to weigh in.
And I think one of the things that staff has done that's been helpful is providing like an ABC scenario option, like we had at the August 23rd meeting. I think Director Wright was the one that provided that with some options there. So I find those types of scenarios helpful, providing that information so that we have information with which to work.
I also don't want to create extra work either. So I want to find a balance between, I want to give you guidance and feedback that's helpful without you having to create a bunch of extra work to get that information. So whatever that sweet spot looks like.
I appreciate it.
So
a little extra work up front usually saves
Sure.
time in the end.
So Barb, that there are lots of limitations in managing government budgets. I don't know the level of detail that the departments that all the department heads necessarily have across the board. So one of the things that I think one of the things you would find concerning is if a department head unknowingly were exceeding expenditures, right? Exceeding authorized expenditures in a given time frame, because that's typically something that would automatically trigger in a budget amendment. So has there been discussion about how that would be managed with the department heads managing their own budgets?
And I think we have had some discussions about this over the past few years on kind of leading up to this and what would we do. Currently, department heads do actually send me notifications if they are looking for a budget adjustment. And so they're already able to do budget adjustments within their departments that I don't necessarily bring back to council if it's not for specifically requested items. If a department head makes a request for a specific item, like a large piece of equipment, then it's always been, if they're not going to buy that piece of equipment and they're going to get something else, they need to come back and ask council. This is going to be a little different where they're sort of allowed to make those decisions on what they need in their departments. And so it's the larger things that are going to change a little. As I mentioned, they're still going to have to give me budget line items so I can keep track of them. And then if they want to spend more out of one line item and less out of another, then they would just let me know and I can adjust those budgets like I kind of do already. The big one is going to be the FTEs and the salaries. That's going to take a bit more tracking, but we in finance are doing the monthly finance reports anyway, showing us where everybody is in their budgets. And so I think this is going to give them a bit more of an opportunity to track their budgets. And I would love to say that our new Park and Rec director has experience with Springbrook and is already running her reports and talking about budgets. And I'm very excited. And Director Wright has some people in his department now who are digging into the budgets and looking at trends. And so I think we're getting to a point, we're growing up. We're getting to a point where we can actually do this department level budgeting successfully. So.
Any other input from council?
No, thanks. That's a great answer. Thank you.
So one thing I know that I've asked for is a depreciation schedule that the police and public works and for us, the police vehicles. I know that's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars a year that we're funding as part of their depreciation schedule. But with public works and their heavy piece of equipment, expensive equipment, we don't know what that maintenance schedule is like and what the life expectancy is. And so that information is helpful for us to budget for that equipment. And also with the merging of the Public Works Department and the Parks Department, understanding what the level of services are for the areas that the city is responsible for maintaining. Because currently there is not a clear plan for that. And so understanding the necessary staffing and equipment needs is something that would be appropriate to have available to us as we work with the budget going forward. So a lot of good work is taking place, and so it's appreciated. All right, thank you, Barb. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I think that gives me some good place to work on. As I mentioned, I'll bring forward the base budget and revenues next week, and we can kind of talk about some other, do we want to continue with funding certain programs or, that type of thing. We can kind of get started in some of those discussions as we move through. And I believe we're doing the salary survey, staffing, strategic staffing study, cost of living. I think October 4th. I have it on the schedule as October 4th or September 20th. I'm not sure when Director Warrington is going to be ready for that. So just heads up, all that will be kind of coming at one time so we can talk about that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Wright, who will be presenting the comprehensive docket? I see multiple names.
Planning manager left hand will start and Robertson and myself will provide it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Council President, Council members, David Levitan, Planning Manager. So I'm just going to do a really quick run through the 2022 comp plan docket as we look forward to moving on to the public hearings that are required to adopt the docket. So just a little bit of an overview. The council ratified the docket back in March of 2022. There are kind of the standard text amendments and also a concurrent update to the Shoreline Master Program. That's something that it's a carryover from last year. It's basically making updates to the SMP to be consistent with the development code as it relates to primarily multifamily residential development within the waterfront residential zone. And then also a minor map amendment for the property just across the street, the Rowing Club's boathouse.
So the Planning Commission has done very good work over the last 4 months, held a work session per month to review the land use element, the parks and recreation element, capital facilities, public services, and then also spent a meeting kind of sweltering in the heat over at the public workshop discussing proposed map amendments, which was a very lively discussion. So that's really going to be the focus of tonight. I did want to offer an opportunity for Director Halverson, if he'd like to talk a little bit more about the updated methodology for capital projects. That's also a component that's being incorporated into the capital facilities plan, the capital facilities element of the comprehensive plan, basically ranking a different way of ranking and prioritizing capital projects. Attachment 1 of your packet included a memorandum on this topic, as well as some draft tables that then would be incorporated into the capital facilities element. So I didn't know if Aaron wanted to talk a little bit more about that, or we can kind of move on to the map amendments.
Yes, I'm more than willing to discuss. I'm trying to log in here. No, I'll forego that. I'll just remind you that the city, we evaluated a long list of projects, a 20-year list of projects, greater than 20-year list of projects, quite frankly, and evaluated those against somewhat objective, what our best attempt at objective criteria to create a ranking, an objective ranking for each of the projects in the respective project areas. There are 5 project areas and 94 projects that were ranked. The total cost estimate of all of the projects is $174 million. That's why I say it's a greater than 20-year project list. It's a lifetime project list, perhaps 2 or 3 of my careers, maybe. Anyway, that's the purpose of ranking them. So the next step is to take this ranked list, compare these projects that are included in your packet to available resources, grants, grant eligibility, local revenues, things like that, and create a capital improvement plan, which is really a 6-year plan that will be incorporated into the budget. The idea of the capital improvement plan is that those projects either have funding assigned to them, dedicated to them, or there is a very good chance that they will be funded with a grant. Any questions on that? Okay, well, I had a lot of fun putting together the spreadsheet. I'll say that. Thank you.
All right, so I'll go ahead and move on. So the kind of the focus of the conversation tonight was really on the map amendments. So just a reminder, as part of the docket, the city council did ratify 2 potential map amendments. M1 was a citizen initiated map amendment for these 2 parcels here on 20th Street Southeast. This is South Lake Stevens Road, where it meets 20th Street Southeast. So this was a citizen initiated proposal to change the existing land use designation from high density residential to commercial with a corresponding rezone to commercial district. The commission did discuss this proposal at their meeting back in July, and were supportive of this. And they also, there was some discussion about potentially expanding the boundaries of map amendment N1 to either include the parcel here on the west side of 106. So 106 that leads into the subdivision here to the south would potentially be the dividing line between commercial and residential, or potentially even expanding it to the sub-area boundary, which ends here, which includes 2 additional properties. The general consensus from the Planning Commission was that we should explore adding this property, but not expanding it east of 106. So we did want to get some feedback from the City Council. I've reached out to the property owner of this property owner here in the hatched green a couple of times by phone, and also send a letter, and haven't been able to be in contact with them. Before we did formally issue the 60-day notice, I would like to, attempt to reach out to them one more time, just to notify them if we are intending to include them within the map amendment area. And then the other map amendment was a city initiated map amendment, really kind of a 10-year check-in on the 20th Street Southeast Corridor Sub-Area Plan, really kind of evaluating potential changes to land uses. So we kind of took some direction from the city council, looked around within the eastern portion of the sub-area and looked at potential areas where map amendments may be warranted. We specifically ended up looking at 3 areas. Area A was the north side of 20th Street on either side of 99th Avenue Southeast. So that's shown on this illustration here. So this is all existing commercial. This would be to expand these areas on the north side of 20th to potentially amend those from high density residential to either commercial or mixed use. So we did have that discussion. I'll get into some of the findings and some of the recommendations from the Planning Commission after we have after we have a brief discussion of areas B and C. So moving on to area B, which was in your attachments, attachment 3, it included these, erroneously included these areas all the way down to 20th, but it's basically the area north of area A. And we looked at potentially exploring a rezone from RA 12 up to multifamily residential, had that discussion with the Planning Commission, and we can get into a little bit more detail, but they were generally not supportive of that, similar to any of the recommendations as part of the 2022 docket. Their preference was really to defer any potential changes beyond the citizen initiated amendment until the 2024 periodic update, so that we could have a more comprehensive look at potential map amendments citywide, and also that we would have the findings from our housing needs analysis and have completed our housing action plan, so we could take a more holistic approach to potential changes to meet our long-term housing and employment capacity needs. And then the third one was area C. So this area kind of in very dark black. It's the cul-de-sac of 97th Drive Southeast. This is State Route 9. This is 20th Street Southeast. So this is a residential neighborhood that back as part of the 2019 comprehensive plan docket was changed from residential to commercial to try to accommodate some of the city's projected employment needs and to address its projected employment deficits. We did have this discussion with the commissioners, several of the commissioners that were on the commission at the time, kind of in hindsight, felt that that maybe wasn't the right decision, that the city should potentially reevaluate that. That was the only area of the 3 areas within map amendment N3 that they thought should potentially be considered as part of the 2022 dockets. This area does have a relatively limited employment capacity. It shows about 32 jobs. That may not also factor in the current residential nature or the access and the kind of the cul-de-sac nature of this area. As I previously mentioned, the city council only just changed this 3 years ago as part of the comp plan docket, so it might be a little bit soon to be kind of reverting back to that residential land use. But that was the general recommendation from the Planning Commission and something that we would like to discuss with the city council before we actually issue the 60-day notice and include the potential map amendments as part of that. So just a little bit about the next steps. We do need to issue the 60-day notice to Commerce and do our SEPA environmental review, which will be likely an addendum to the environmental impact statement for the existing comprehensive plan. We've identified preliminary public hearing dates of November 2nd for the Planning Commission and November 22nd for the City Council. So this would be concurrent with the budget discussions, but that meeting on the 22nd seemed like it would allow for a little bit more discussion. And then staff would like City Council feedback before issuing these draft amendments to Commerce. Sounds like you didn't have much feedback on the capital facilities methodology. If you had any ideas on map amendment 1, which was the citizen initiated map amendment, and whether we should expand the boundaries at all, either to the west side or to the east side of 106th. And then Planning Commission feedback on map amendment M3, including Planning Commission's recommendation to defer most of the potential map amendments to the 2024 periodic update, but to potentially consider amending that area C, which is 97th Drive Southeast, so that it would now have a residential land use designation. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have a question regarding M1. First of all, I appreciate your efforts to get a hold of the property owner prior to them getting the 60-day letter. Thank you for your extra work in doing that. I know that's not a requirement. It makes sense to me to kind of look at that property also in this process. I'm curious to know what the reasons were for the planning committee not wanting to extend that commercial area to the boundary. Is it the sub area boundary? City boundary?
Oh, all the way to the city. So east
Yep.
of 106 to
Yep.
the sub area boundary. I think the general thought was, 106 provided a bit of a natural dividing line between the commercial and residential areas. If you look at that property in green to the north, it still has commercial. It would have commercial to the west. Whereas the areas kind of east of 106, there's a residential neighborhood to the north, there's a residential neighborhood to the south. It transitions into an even lower density residential neighborhood to the east. And so I think the thought was 106 kind of provides that natural transition between commercial and residential. And so it's not an exact science. You need to obviously create your boundary between land uses somewhere, but they thought that 106 provided a little bit more of a buffer and a natural transition than extending it to the actual sub area boundary.
Okay, thank you.
The questions or comments?
Yeah, I got one. So the planning commission decided that they didn't think that they wanted to go with, I'm trying to find the map amendment right now. I think it was area C is what we're talking about. They didn't want to go with, what was it that they didn't want to go to there?
The cul-de-sac.
So with area C, that was the one area where they thought that a potential map amendment as part of the docket would potentially be warranted. They thought that the current commercial zoning commercial land use designation maybe wasn't appropriate for that residential neighborhood, and that it should potentially be changed to high density residential with the corresponding zoning designation, likely of RA12. As I mentioned, that is something that the city council only just changed a few years ago. So wanted to make sure that we got council feedback on that.
So what about going to high density residential there?
We could go to high density residential. I don't know how likely that would be to redevelop to high density residential. The homes are largely from the early 1970s. Property values have obviously increased pretty rapidly in recent years. It's an established kind of single family residential neighborhood, but that is something that we could potentially look at.
And then the other area that they said that they didn't want to look at high density residential.
So it's this area, which is area B. It's the east side of 99th, kind of north of 20th Street. So this was area A would be this, where we had considered potentially changing this to commercial. These are kind of as you get a little bit further north along 99th, which is a transit corridor, not high capacity and not frequent transit service, but does provide some level of transit. We thought it might be appropriate to examine a higher density residential zoning designation. It would not require a map amendment to the land use map, but it would require a rezone. So they thought that, they weren't necessarily opposed to that. They just thought that the city should take a more holistic approach and kind of defer anything that major to the 2024 periodic update. We're going to basically need to be adopting a new comprehensive plan within the next 2 years. So they thought that it would be good to have the analysis from the housing needs analysis, develop our housing action plan, which we need to complete by June 30th of 2023. And that will provide the technical foundation for the comprehensive plan housing element. They just thought it was best to hold off on any decisions like that until the 2024 update. Councilmember Dickinson.
David, excuse me, with the improvements of the SR9 South Lake Stevens roundabout area, sewer is being brought over or under Highway 9 to the east, correct? Into South Lake Stevens Road. Right.
I believe it is, yes.
So I guess the potential, getting back to Councilmember Daughtry's comment, high density on that one cul-de-sac area. I mean, just kind of looking at this map, there may be potential for some accessory dwelling units if sewer were available. And presently there's no sewer in there. So that's why you've seen that relatively low density. So I'm just wondering, as far as opening up the possibilities of enacting our housing action plan. And making some of these properties a little bit more conducive to development activity may be warranted. So this map is very hard to see the structures on these individual lots, but it appears there's probably 4, 5, 6 lots that may accommodate accessory dwelling units. So
Yeah, sorry for it being so dark. They're generally about 8,000 to 10,000 square foot lots. So the majority of them probably would be able to accommodate, depending on where the houses are set back. I can bring up a kind of a standard aerial as well. All but one of these are developed. There's, I think, 15 houses. If you'll remember, as part of the consideration of the docket, there was a citizen initiated proposal to change the designation of just one of the properties on 97th. It essentially would be kind of a site-specific comp plan amendment and site-specific rezone, and staff didn't think that that was warranted because we don't, the city doesn't generally support kind of site-specific proposals. That was for a vacant parcel, the only vacant parcel in the neighborhood, and because it's currently vacant and has commercial zoning, it's not able to develop a single family residence on the property or develop any type of residential on the property because of that commercial designation. But in general, I think there would be the capacity, a lot easier for attached ADUs than detached, but there definitely are some larger lots, more in the 10,000 square foot area.
And with the basic planning commission recommendation, we talked about going to 12, that would allow for a variety of different housing stock in there. It could allow for the ADUs. It could allow some of those lots to be turned into duplex lots. It could allow for some attached housing through our infill code on the existing vacant lots. So there is some opportunity for different types of residential development if the planning commission's recommendation is moved forward to that residential. If we're going to a multifamily, I think that's where the commentary was that, again, you get into this redevelopment situation that would require not a little investment, it would require purchasing large swaths of these properties to redevelop something different. So,
What about the parcels to the west of that? Right there it's still east of 9, but the west of 97th or whatever, 97th.
we continue to have discussions with a couple of interested groups in developing that and through the application stage on the 2 properties directly adjacent to South Lake Stevens Road. So there's a likelihood that those properties between 9 and 97 neighborhood will get development applications next year. So
And that's commercial.
commercial.
Okay, thank you.
Hello,
Yeah, sorry, Councilmember Dickinson.
that's all right. One of the things I like to do is I'm a hands-on, face-to-face. I like to get in my car and drive to these places and truly look at them and see what is there. Is it treed? Is it? And your map doesn't tell me the exact addresses of any of these places. So it kind of leaves me in a tough place. But also, I just want to make sure Mr. Wright knows that I could hardly hear anything he said. I could hardly hear that. But I just think it would be helpful if the map was very specific as to what street it's on. I could see 9 there. But to make a decision when I don't really know where this is or what is being torn down or what's being replaced, it really kind of makes it difficult for me. And it may just be me, but it's got to be straight that for me to make a decision. I need to be more clear on where these places are. And I would be willing to get in my car and go look. Because I do better. I feel more confident that I'm making the right decision when I do that.
Well, I appreciate the feedback, and we can definitely work on clarifying the locations on some of the graphics that we use. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I guess just before we go back to planning commission and send it out to the Department of Commerce, just want to make sure that there is general direction for staff on the plan with the suggestions talked about tonight, and any changes you'd like to see, modifications to that. So again, the first half of what was presented is just housekeeping items for you, and then some specific questions on these different land use opportunities.
I'll just say, I mean, my general input is anything that we can do to maximize our commercial availability, given our limited commercial space within the city, that would help contribute to our sales tax revenue. It would be a benefit to the citizens.
Greg has his hand up.
Greg?
Oh, I was just going to say I'm with Mary. Cannot hear Russ. All the other council members are coming in fine, but Russ is just not coming across at all.
I have a mic now. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, that's much better. Thank you, Russ.
All right, anything else on the comprehensive plan docket briefing?
Do you need a flashlight over there?
It's a little dark.
I think we were talking about budget
Is that okay?
restraints, and I guess
Yeah.
lighting is included in that.
It's
So,
okay.
Director Wright, the retail strategies report.
So one of the items on your council priority list was just to get an update on the retail strategies group that we've been working with. So just for a brief reminder, Retail Strategies, they are a national company that does retail recruitment. They try to put property owners with different types of businesses. And the city council authorized a contract to use their resources with part of the pandemic recovery funds. So we've had several engagements with them this last year. And I specifically asked them to just sort of give us, for the council's benefit, an update of some of their latest actions. And they also put together just sort of a timeline of what it takes to go through recruitment. And in your staff report, it also talks about other deliverables that they have produced to date, which includes some new demographic information for the city, a new tapestry segment review, which is just identifying different types of age groups and their economic status and sort of their buying habits and dwelling habits. So that's important to the market. So that information has been included. They've represented us at a couple of conferences already and made a number of inquiries with national corporations on our behalf. What you'll see in their summary report, again, it sort of gives you a timeline of what it looks like to do the recruitment, from identifying a site to engaging a specific type of retailer, and then going through a feasibility option, et cetera. And then there is a list in there of the major types of corporations that have shown interest in the Lake Stevens area and that are interested in maybe coming into the city. And again, they're just continuing that conversation with those different groups. So again, this is just more of an informational briefing for you tonight, and just showing you the status of what have they produced and what are their latest efforts looking like. And this continues to be an ongoing conversation between myself, the city administrator, mayor with this group. Anytime we get any leads in the community, so-and-so is looking for space, we send it on to Retail Strategies to vet. And again, if we hear from property owners that have properties for sale, we push those over as well.
Thank you. Questions?
What is a QSR?
I'm glad you asked that.
Probably quick serve restaurant.
Oh, maybe it's the
You
quick serve
are
restaurant.
correct. That's
Okay.
exactly what it is.
I guess,
Job, Steve.
how long have these folks been on board here, Russ? About 9 months? No, 12 months?
6
About a
to
year?
9 months, not quite a year.
I guess the discouraging thing I see on here is the potential market interest. It's all retail stuff. It's not job creation. And so I mean, it is job creation, but it's not high paying job creation by any means. And that's what we're really trying to focus on. And so I guess that's kind of the,
And I guess that would be a different firm. So that is what these folks specialize in, is commercial retail, not so much in industrial manufacturing siding. So that would probably be a different consultant for us to find to try and do that.
I think until we get sewer in the area of the city, that would be realistic. I don't know that it would, how
sewer in the city. What?
sewer in the area of the city.
In the industrial
In the
area.
industrial area.
Oh,
Hiring a consultant to help us with that. I don't know how effective that would be.
I'll be honest, I share concerns with what we have to date. What I heard you say was when city staff get leads, they're giving those leads to this recruitment firm. And as I understand it, it's their job to recruit potential leads to bring the staff.
It's saying is when we hear of a piece of property that's up for sale, then we give that to retail strategists, and they go try to recruit to that property.
So it is a two-way street, but I appreciate your comment that the way I stated that. Yes, staff does provide them with information, but they also are bringing the national firms to us and talking about location. So I appreciate the concern and the way I stated that.
have you had those discussions with these identified sporting goods, general merchandise store, shoe store?
We haven't had the direct negotiations with all of the firms they're talking to. It's really been a second or third party conversation.
Just a high level.
Yes.
So this one gas station, is that in addition to the ARCO that's currently under
That-
construction?
Yes, an additional gas station.
And in addition to the one at Costco?
Yes.
So Costco, ARCO, and then one additional gas station for the city.
I guess the simple question is, can we point to a direct success of recruitment through this process?
Not to date.
So I guess a follow-up question to that excellent question, Councilmember Frederick. So what is the expectation for the benchmark that they would provide us? I mean, how would we identify this as being a successful consulting opportunity for engagement for us?
Well, I think just to Councilmember, Frederick's point that, does this end up to fruition to citing a significant retailer in the community? I would count that as success. What we understand from them and, going through economic development for a long time, it doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes it is more than a year, could be 2-3 years to go through a process. So it just became, is the level of comfort. Obviously, we see other developments occurring in the city that don't have a component of a recruitment firm going through and they're, building out to success. So it was another tool that, we were looking at.
I wonder if it would make sense to have it like some deliverables and a timeline. So by, by this date, whether it's July 1st, 2023, or, we expect that we will be in negotiation with a retailer as a direct result of working with this company. I'm just like making up numbers, but you know what I mean? And maybe an outside timeline, if by this date, we haven't had any successful engagement with any retail opportunities, or there isn't anything moving forward that we decide to move in a different direction.
Right, and so their contract would be, it's on a yearly contract. that
Okay.
we've,
Is it calendar-
established with them, and so we
calendar
would
year?
have to approve. I don't recall if it was on a calendar year or not.
Okay.
But the city does have the option of backing out of extending their contract.
I
If
think
we're
it-
not
it-
satisfied with, services rendered.
I think if it would be, I think if we all had a shared understanding of what satisfied, how that's defined and kind of what we're looking for, I think that would make a decision a little easier.
Okay.
Do you recall what, excuse me, do you recall what the cost for that yearly contract?
45,000.
45,000.
So just sort of a general takeaway. I'm definitely hearing everybody wants some tangibles and really to see the product that's being paid for, what this service is. So maybe try to come back with some deliverables, some timelines that will show actual success. And then we can reevaluate if it's appropriate to extend their contract or not.
Sounds great.
So one thing I don't see on here on the list there, and that I've heard feedback from the community as well, we appreciate like Francisco's and LJ's. As far as having a so-called signature restaurant in Lake Stevens is something that's absent from that list, something that, if you had a special occasion or something you want to bring out of town guests to or whatever, we don't have something like that in the city. And so I realize the market dictates whether that happens or not, but we're the third largest city in Snohomish County. We should be in line for something like that.
Okay. Any other comments from the council on that?
All right, so let's move on to the draft agenda. Kelly? John?
Yeah, I will pull it up here. Each of you should have a copy of next week's tentative agenda for September 13th. Russ, do you want to speak to it?
Sure. So as far as guest business, we will have Sophia Nunez from the Lake Stevens Food Bank, who's going to be having a conversation with the council. City department reports. We'll have a couple of introductions of employees, and then ongoing department updates, probably tackling some of the ideas on your priority list. Then consent agenda with some vouchers, minutes, a couple of other contract items. And then as we get to public hearing, we have the short-term rentals ready to go for public hearing after work with the council subcommittee. No action items at this point. And then obviously we would talk about the draft agenda and the budget discussion again, moving forward for future items.
All right, any comments on the draft agenda? Hearing none and seeing none, we will conclude the standard or regular session and move into executive session. Director Wright, who would you like to remain for that executive session of the city staff?
Myself, Director Steve.
And how much time?
Probably will need 20 minutes to a half an hour.
So Clerk Chalmers would start with 20 minutes and then extend as needed.
So this is a discussion of property acquisition per RCW 42.30.1101 for approximately 20 minutes with possible action.
Testing.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but
Okay.
I'm supposed to be in the meeting.
That's all right. I don't care if you can see me. If you can hear me, that's all that matters.
No, aren't you supposed to be in the executive session though?
I am.
Oh, okay. I'm thinking I'm still hearing the room there. So
Okay.
I was hopefully.
Can everyone hear us in the virtual audience?
Yes, that's why I was going to say someone needs to go up on the panel and start executive session so it mutes the entire system.
Fine. Connecting.
Test, test, test.
Can't turn on my camera, it says.
Do you aren't you going to a different meeting, like a team meeting or something for executive session?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, this one right here, you'd want to probably just.
This is still, Mary, can you log out of the Zoom?
Okay.
And Troy, can you log out as well?
Okay.
And
All
then
right.
Mary, if you can go into Teams.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Mary is in Zoom and on Teams. Okay.
I can hear you all.
Okay, so if you can either mute your mic and turn off your camera on Zoom or log out of Zoom, then we can start our meeting in
Okay.
Teams.
All right, let me see what I can do here. Okay. Come on. Yes, sure.
Okay, it is 7:50 PM and the council has requested an additional 15 minutes. Executive session is extended to 8:05. So it is 8:05, and the council has requested an additional 10 minutes to their executive session. We'll be back at 8:15. All right, go ahead.
All right, we've concluded our executive session. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
All right, we're done, Mary. Thank you. Bye.
So you were talking about